Good times and great music at 2NURFM 103.7 as we take a look at some of the things happening in the world of education. We do that with our Professor of Education from the University of Newcastle, Professor John Fischetti, who has come in, and something you can't see, let alone hear, is he's got a brand new pair of shoes on. Well, they're new to me. Nice cushioned running shoe underneath, mate, but dress on top. So who are you, like Superman, ready for all occasions?
It's a hybrid, Mark. It's a hybrid.
It's you've heard of hybrid cars. We now have hybrid footwear. Today you want to talk about absenteeism, but before we do that, I want to make sure that you get the localised word for it. You ready?
Yes.
You wag school. Wagon school.
All right.
That's the term.
Okay.
So make sure you refer to it as that. That's if you're just having an extra day off for the fun of it. But let's start with the numbers, John, and what the absenteeism generally is, because I kind of thought this seemed high, but you kind of tell me that's not the big story.
Generally, schools are always at the 90%, 93% mark for kids that show up. And of course, with illnesses and routine issues of travels and such, students might be away. The kind of cutting class or wagism, as you might have mentioned, that actually would be normal kind of routine. But no, this is kids actually leaving school for long periods of time, or maybe just AWOL, absent without leave. There's always 25% of the students in New South Wales who don't actually finish school. They don't sit the HSC. Starting in year 10 is the real issue, Mark, where some kids literally start tuning out when they get old enough where they can be working, or they get issues that come up in their lives that are complicated, or they decide, I'm done with this. But we're increasing that by 5, 6, 7%, it seems. Parts of the country, much more than that. So is that a trend? Is it just a temporary issue? Or is it what the students experienced in the last few years, just where their pans are being put up and they're going, I'm done with this?
And to be clear, we're not necessarily talking about kids that they get to that end of year 10 and they head off to do an early trade, or their career boom is off and running, but just kids that generally just fall out of sync with school altogether. And those numbers, sadly, are on the rise a little bit. Some of the reasons that are being touted for that.
So the Productivity Commission report, which came out just a couple of weeks ago, is throwing that the reality, what's different from the issues you just raised, is the mental health issues, particularly anxiety, that many young people are facing as they come out of a pandemic era of education. Imagine going through years 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, and now you're in 10, 11, 12, have turned some students into just, I'm done, I'll be fine, but leave me alone. And for others, a much more higher rate of anxiety and mental health issues that are actually needing to be treated, and many of them are, where school doesn't fit right now for them. They'll likely be back to education. They'll go to TAFE, they'll get a trade, they'll go to uni. But for right now, they're zoned out. The tricky part of that is a lot of it is based on the fact that as we've returned to school, particularly a year ago, whatever normal means, I don't know more, but whatever normal means, that it looks a lot like it did before, yet for a couple of years they were allowing a lot of flexibility, a lot of personalization. You could use your phone, you could make it up, you could kind of turn your camera on or off. And now we're going back to some of that rote stuff, particularly in the high examination areas. And students are saying, that's not for me. So we do have what it indicates a higher number of kids literally who have stopped wanting that formal education as a pathway for now.
So maybe there is a lesson here, a greater lesson in life here, that we tried it that way. I wasn't a fan of all of the government overreach and authoritarianism that was around that, but it happened. And the kids a lot more kids don't seem to be doing that well. Maybe there's a lesson for all of us here in the adult world as well, that's spending too much time disconnected, doing everything remotely on Zoom, on phones and all of that. Great to have the technology there, but if we withdraw too much, maybe we'll see some of those other issues played out, not just for those at the school level, but for everybody else.
I think the real trend appears to be in response for all of us is multiple pathways. There used to be one way. You take algebra at 9 and maybe English at 10, then science at 11, and then maybe you get to go to lunch. Now it's about, could there be multiple pathways? Because the design of secondary schools looks like it did for our mothers and their mothers. And is there a way now it could look like what our young people need? Well-being at the core of that. Because for many young people, they were taught to be anxious. We all taught ourselves to be anxious. I mean, you could argue your newscasts were all about promoting the worry that we had for a while. Now it's trying to get us back to normal news. I think these kids have worn it. It's part of their DNA. The other feature is some of those devices we have. Facebook was a 2004 invention, the smartphone a 2007 invention. So all of those kids' lives, they've had only what they want being told to them in their hand. And in that sense, what we have to do is get them to move away from some of those influences so they can actually relax and be okay. Because almost every minute you could be checking for who's telling me what and what's gone on and who's there. And it's mostly designed to be negative and not help you feel better about yourself. So we've got to get kids healthier, partly by both embracing those technologies and also putting them aside a lot of the day. We spent a lot of time talking about that. But if well-being and anxiety are leading issues of what's tuning kids off, we can't ignore it. And I think right now we're just pretending it's not there. 30% of this year's Year 12 class from 2022 didn't finish school. And what are they doing? They're probably working, but they're working in jobs that are not going to help them have the life they hope to have. It's only going to be education that gets them through, and we're going to have to address those mental health issues first.
And maybe with the devices and all of the tech that we use, maybe start treating it like the tides. Sometimes high, right up, and
great.
sometimes low. It's all the way. You can use that.
And the rip current can take you out without you knowing it.
See?
There's
a PowerPoint presentation. It's halfway. We've got the bones around it.
It'll work well on radio.
John Fischetti, Professor of Education, thanks for your time, mate. Back to class before you get your name marked off the roll.
Thank you very much.
2NURFM 103.7.
A broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.